Absolutely. So many reach out to us and can't be named publicly. A lot of lab animal veterinarians who, went to work for these labs trying to improve animal welfare. Then they voiced concerns about the lab. One in particular was the Alpha Genesis lab that had the 40 monkeys break out of the lab. People reached out to us about their concerns with that lab. The climate controls weren't working. The cages were rusty. Monkeys were getting out all the time. They were forced to do tests on monkeys whose livers were already cirrhosed from previous studies. And they tried everything to address their concerns and got nowhere and ended up just having to leave and quit. Those perspectives are very useful for various stories that come out there in the media. I know Physicians Committee did a story about Neuralink and the primates that Elon Musk used for his Neuralink implant and the horrors.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people. And support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Our guest today is Dr. Crystal Heath, a Los Angeles-based shelter veterinarian and the executive director of Our Honor, a nonprofit that supports veterinary students, veterinarians, and other animal professionals in speaking their conscience to create a more ethical systems that consider the best interest of all species. She is also on the board of L.E.A.P, Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet, known as the humane alternative to 4-H and FFA, which aims to transform today's youth into humane leaders of tomorrow who advocate for work towards an equitable future for all living beings and the planet. Dr. Heath is also on the founding committee of Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown. Dr. Heath was named one of Vox's 2023 Future Perfect 50, which honors the scientists, thinkers, scholars, writers, and activists working on solutions to today's and tomorrow's biggest problems. Crystal, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am just so impressed with your bio and some of the information that I learned when I was doing a little bit of research. But perhaps you could start by just giving us what inspired you to go from the traditional veterinary route to where you ended up founding Our Honor and becoming an animal rights activist.
Well, even before veterinary school, I grew up in, rural California. I was part of 4-H. And even back then, I was questioning things, and I decided not to, raise an animal for the county fair where they would be killed for slaughter. And I raised dairy goats. I grew up drinking raw and pasteurized goat milk. But then when I learned that if I bred my goats and they had boys, I would have to sell them to slaughter, I decided not to breed my dairy goats. And I participated in other projects in 4-H, including photography, which I do a lot of now. And I was a horse person, and I had chickens and iguanas and snakes and dogs and cats. And so animals were my first friends. And I was also just a very shy child and was bullied and didn't have a lot of friends. And me and my sister, I have a twin sister, and we got our hands on some PETA material early on. And that's when we started questioning things and wanted to become vegetarian. And my parents were against that because they thought we couldn't be healthy on that diet. And as I got older, I ended up house sitting for some people who worked for PETA and learned what they ate. And that's when and they had like a little micro sanctuary that I took care of. And that's when I started to know what to eat and started becoming vegetarian and then eventually vegan. And then I decided to go to vet school. And Actually, I graduated from UC Davis in 2012, and about a quarter of my class was vegetarian, which I think
Oh,
is surprising to a lot of people. But I do think that there are far more vegans and vegetarians who are veterinarians than the general public. But I also learned how our industry is condoning a lot of the cruelest practices that allow animal-based protein production to flourish. So I actually went to vet school because I wanted to be a horse vet. I had been a horse girl my whole life and rescued off the track thoroughbreds and, always had rescue horses and wanted to help them. But then I realized the vast majority of the horse world is very profit driven. I treated a lot of racehorses at UC Davis as a student and really learned that the culture of that industry was not anything I could be involved with as a vet. And they were very money oriented. So I discovered shelter medicine in vet school and discovered I could help so many animals in the shelter, spaying and neutering and providing homes for these animals. And this was just, shelter medicine was something that I thought was going to be very sad and a lot of euthanasia. And then I discovered all these really great shelters, and the veterinarians who worked there were so inspiring and also very much aligned with me. It seemed like a lot of the shelter vets were vegans too. So
it's good
I
to know.
went on that path. And then once I paid off my $200,000 in student loan debt, that, allowed me the freedom to explore other ways I could help animals. And I started connecting with various animal activist organizations and getting more involved. And then in 2020, ventilation shutdown was a thing that entered my radar. And this is where during the COVID-19 pandemic, producers couldn't send their pigs to slaughter because a lot of the slaughterhouse workers were sick, getting sick with COVID. That reduced capacity by 45%. And so they resorted to sealing up buildings, pumping in heat and steam, and waiting for their pigs to die. And I started voicing concerns about this and discovered that the American Veterinary Medical Association allowed this method of mass extermination in their guidelines for the depopulation of animals. And then I faced a ton of backlash, on veterinary Facebook groups for voicing concerns about this. And I was kicked out of veterinary Facebook groups. And there was this smear campaign that happened. And then we got FOIA documents that the Animal Agriculture Alliance had sent out this email saying that I was trying to find information from producers and that people should block me. And they told them to send out this email to all their California veterinarians to warn them about me. And then I spoke to my journalist friend about this, who was connected with the great Glenn Greenwald, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who broke the Edward Snowden story. And he wrote about this industry backlash and retaliation against me. And he had me on his show. And that's really what fueled the launch of my nonprofit, Our Honor. And we brought a whole bunch of veterinarians together who are aligned with us. And we, support veterinarians who face bullying and retaliation from the industry for voicing concerns about this. But now we're doing so much more than just that. We are really working to end the legitimacy of animal-based protein. People trust veterinarians. And when they find out that veterinarians are being used by this industry to condone the most awful practices like pig slaughterhouse gas chambers and ventilation shutdown, they're horrified. But they want to hear from the veterinarians like us who say, no, it doesn't have to be this way. And we need to dismantle this method of protein production and support animal-free methods of protein production. So that's how Our Honor was born, fueled by that industry backlash and retaliation. And that's what kind of brought me here today. And now we're working with so many different animal protection organizations and so many different attorneys and bringing veterinary experts to legal cases to address some criminal animal cruelty that these corporations are doing.
I was struck by some of the bios on your website of some of your colleagues who, what they had to endure in order to, stay in the profession, things
Yeah.
that I don't think people realize that, experimenting on dogs in
Hmm.
veterinary school, to the end of that animal's life where people
Yeah.
would say, I can't do that, and they would be shunned and
Hmm.
told perhaps they weren't going to graduate. So many things that I don't think the public, as you said, we trust our veterinarians, and some of the terrible choices that they have to make in order to be helpful to animals. It's got to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we actually just published a paper today about what goes on in veterinary schools. And it's just published in the Journal of Veterinary Medical Education. And we got public records from all of the veterinary schools, public universities in the United States and Canada, and tabulated how many animals are killed in each of those programs, as well as the justifications they use for doing this. And we hope bringing transparency to this will start the ball rolling for ending terminal animal use in veterinary schools. And my goal is within 5 years, we will no longer see schools purchasing animals from biosupply companies to kill for student training. And even human medical schools, they don't kill animals in their student training. And, they did away with that, and the veterinary profession should follow as well. So it's it is just horrifying. The veterinary profession was a very white, male dominated profession. Now it's becoming more diverse and more women. So things are changing. But, it takes a lot of effort to dismantle some of those really harmful systems that are already in place, and that culture that's there. I think people go to veterinary school when they're young, usually under 25. They don't have a fully developed frontal lobe yet, and they're just happy to get in there, and they have this bit of imposter syndrome, like, oh my gosh, maybe they chose the wrong person, I don't belong, I'm not smart enough to be here. They respect their professors. I respected UC Davis, the best veterinary school in the world, supposedly. So I took their word for it that they had really thought about this curriculum and were doing it in the most ethical way possible. I was a conscientious objector from the large animal labs where they killed animals in that. But I also, because I was an objector, I missed out on that large animal surgery that I could have learned from. And that's not fair to me for following my ethics and not getting to learn that material because I took an ethical position. But I also didn't know at the same time that a lot of the animals used in our cadaver labs were sourced in ways that I would deem unethical. And I think that UC Davis, of all schools, has the power to change that. And I hope that they do. And I think that they will. There's a lot of really great people who work there, but they've just never been pressured to change the system. It's always been, good enough. So it just takes people to care and push for change.
I have a couple experiences back before COVID. I had a nonprofit called Share a Dog, and I went to a veterinary conference here in Las Vegas. It was a week-long event, and I was going to be there all week and right alongside these other, vendors. And I just knew it was going to be a wonderful experience. We were all going to be vegan because we all care about animals, right?
Hmm.
And that was not my experience at all. Not that
Hmm.
it was just like the general public.
Yeah.
They were eating their chicken sandwiches and what have you. It was not about, it was just, it's that same disconnect that we see in the everyday population, which I think surprised me because I thought, well, but you're in it for the animals. And I'm sure that they think they are, but there's still that disconnect even in that population. I don't know if you
Yeah.
experienced that yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have so many people, like my parents, believed that you have to eat animals in order to be healthy. And that's the the belief out there that we have to dismantle. And I've gone to so many veterinary conferences, anything to do with sustainability and climate change or large animal medicine. I am there at the CE learning what they're talking about. And a big narrative is as countries increase their wealth, the demand for meat goes up. So veterinarians, we have a duty to ensure that the animals raised are treated well. And that is not true, really. Like, it's what happens is it's not just some innate human demand for meat. These corporations are marketing to societies as they gain more wealth, spending billions of dollars, ensuring that they can expand their markets into these, new societies that are increasing their wealth, and they're denied access to animal-free foods that align with their values. And then veterinarians end up justifying things like gas chambers for pigs, ventilation shutdown, when we inevitably create diseases of pandemic potential by our exploitation of animals. And we are seeing increases of these zoonotic viruses because of the way that we interact with animals. But there's so many of us talking about One Health. I learned this at UC Davis way back in 2012 when I graduated. One Health is the concept that human, animal, plant, and environmental health are all interconnected. Unfortunately, that's a little bit being co-opted by the animal agriculture industry to frame it as we need more vaccines and we need better antibiotic stewardship, not that we need to end our dependence on animal-based methods of protein production, not that we need to scale down animal agriculture. So it's frustrating, and there's so many myths about supply and demand and about how much our money, our tax dollars, are going to prop up this industry. 73% of dairy revenues come from some form of subsidy. If maybe the veterinary profession addressed that and we are very powerful as a group lobbying our senators and our congresspeople. They listen to us as the authorities on animals. And we have a lot of power to change policy. And I think if we used our power in the right way, instead of, as the American Veterinary Medical Association does, it's just kind of using our power to support corporate interests over the interests of animals, we could go a long way in helping animals.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Dr. Crystal Heath of Our Honor, and this is Better Life for Animals. Crystal, your tagline, which I love, is embrace your conscience and we'll back you up. Mm-hmm. Do you find that you get a lot of people reaching out for help, that sometimes they even feel they have to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation? How do you support these people?
Absolutely. So many reach out to us and can't be named publicly. A lot of lab animal veterinarians who, went to work for these labs trying to improve animal welfare. Then they voiced concerns about the lab. One in particular was the Alpha Genesis lab that had the 40 monkeys break out of the lab. People reached out to us about their concerns with that lab. The climate controls weren't working. The cages were rusty. Monkeys were getting out all the time. They were forced to do tests on monkeys whose livers were already cirrhosed from previous studies. And they tried everything to address their concerns and got nowhere and ended up just having to leave and quit. those perspectives are very useful for various stories that come out there in the media. I know Physicians Committee did a story about Neuralink and the primates that Elon Musk used for his Neuralink implant and the horrors that those monkeys went through. We had some of those former lab vets review those documents and speak to journalists about their findings there and validate physician committee's concerns about those experiments and the treatment of those monkeys. So we can find, useful ways for those veterinarians who did suffer in that industry to actually, try to make some change for animals. Another marine mammal zoo, we had veterinarians reach out to us, Miami Seaquarium, that they weren't paying their bills. They were not able to get the animals the supplements and diagnostics they needed because Miami Seaquarium was not paying their companies. They were not paying their workers on time. Animals were dying at the facility. And we ended up speaking to them, and they were able to speak anonymously to a journalist with The Intercept to release that story. And ultimately, Miami Seaquarium was evicted by the mayor, and its process is still ongoing. Now Miami Seaquarium has filed for bankruptcy. So we hope, those animals can get to the right place. But, we help support veterinarians in a variety of ways. And of course, the most tragic thing is the students who are forced to participate in these laboratories that are unethical. And they're working to change their curriculum from the inside. But a lot of them are too scared and just too overwhelmed to do what is needed. And these instructors are telling them, these students, well, you design the curriculum then. That's a lot to put on a student's shoulders. But there are better curriculums out there. Other schools are teaching the same principles, not killing animals. So we support them in whatever direction they want to go in to address these issues. So those are just some of the ways that we help support veterinarians.
Perhaps our honor could offer, yes, I have a curriculum for you here.
Yeah,
Share this with them.
Yeah, I think we could
there's so
do
much
that.
of this is legislative. It's like as you said, people respect the veterinary community, so that is gold, right?
Yes.
And to be able to put that to good use in the public arena, in public awareness, and in legislative change, I think I have a lot of hope for this industry and for wonderful initiatives such as what you've put together here.
Yeah, I have a lot of hope too. I mean, the problem is people don't trust animal rights organizations, animal advocacy organizations. They're often smeared as putting forward highly deceptive footage that is edited in order to gain donations and funding for their causes. And we found if we have veterinarians who are willing to talk to the journalists and attorneys about what is in that footage and say, no, this isn't just industry standard. This is actually criminal animal cruelty, and here's the reasons why. Here's all the things wrong with it. Journalists tend to trust that footage a little bit more, and it makes the story more compelling and more believable. And when veterinarians are out there talking about the harms of an industry or a company, then more people believe it than just vegans or animal rights activists, unfortunately. And I think, we give that industry the social license to operate. And I read a lot of back channel communications obtained from various people at the pork board through FOIA requests. And they talk a lot about how they need veterinarians to lend legitimacy to this. The public is going to take this better coming from veterinarians instead of producers, blah, blah, blah. We are the ones who protect this industry's social license to operate. And we think that we can, if we start speaking out, revoke the social license to operate of these industries.
So what advice then would you give to young veterinarians or to students who love animals, but they fear challenging the status quo and all of these pushes, against humanity? How would you coach them?
It's challenging. A lot of students, reach out to me and are like, I wanted to go to vet school, but oh my gosh, it's a lot. I don't want to hurt animals. And I say, clearly you love animals. And there is a lot you can do as a veterinarian to help animals. I love being a vet. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I work as a veterinarian 3 to 4 to 5 days a week, spaying and neutering animals. I can spay and neuter 100 to 200 animals a week. And I get to be an advocate for animals and help dismantle outdated methods of animal-based protein production. And we need more veterinarians who are willing to do that. And you can also change the curriculum of your vet school. And we are here to back you up and help you do that. So join. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to see the suffering. I don't want to, go through these classes where I have to go on farms. I don't want to have to go do a slaughterhouse tour. But I remind them, like, activists risk their freedom for the opportunity that they are getting as a veterinary student to legally go into these facilities and share their story. And, change your mindset. Think of yourself as James Bond going in, and you're a superhero and you're going to end these systems. You're like a spy. So look at it that way. And if you're willing to do it, I highly recommend doing it. Being a vet is a great job and you get a lot of great opportunities to advocate for animals. So I know it's tough. I know you're going to see some things that you don't want to see, but the animals have to experience it. So, I mean, the least you can do is bear witness to it. I think if you can take it, the veterinary profession needs you.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of courage. And I would imagine so that's why what you're doing is so wonderful, because you could be supportive during that difficult transition, but that they're doing something, maybe learning about the cruelties, but in the end, it's all to end that cruelty or to minimize it. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many stories, I know you've heard them too, about people that they appear to be inside the system of cruelty, but in fact, they're working the margins, trying to get these animals out of there, trying to let people know, listen, can you adopt this one? Can you save this one? This one's, so people are stuck in the system as much as the animals in some cases. And so to decide that you're going to be a warrior and work your way through it so that you can then speak out for them because you've got that credential that our society respects, to maybe make some changes in legislation. I can't think of anything more noble these days.
Absolutely. I think so too. To have a seat at the table where decisions about how animals live and die are made, you can have a seat at the table if you're a veterinarian.
Absolutely. How do you think that listeners can get involved in like legislative efforts to improve animal welfare, or, initiatives that our honor is putting together? How can the general public participate?
Yeah, we definitely need help. We accept volunteers who aren't just veterinarians, because veterinarians are very busy helping their animals. And so we need people who are good writers to write press releases, press advisories, write about the footage we obtain, write about the FOIA documents that we obtain, and help us create social media posts. And legislatively, there's so much legislation out there, and we need, we're always addressing all of these legislative things that are happening, inviting veterinarians to go to city council meetings and speak about these things. And so we're constantly connecting veterinarians with various legislation. So if you have your own local campaign where you could use a veterinarian's voice to lend legitimacy to the campaign, to be an expert in support of animal protection legislation, we can connect you with the veterinarians in your area who are doing that work. So many ways you can help us and we can help you. And we already collaborate with so many different organizations, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, Animal Partisan, Legal Impact for Chickens, so many different groups who are doing great work for animals. So, they can follow us at ouronor.org and check out our newsletter that we publish every week and to be updated on what we're doing, and also follow us on social media too.
Excellent. I noticed that you're also involved with L.E.A.P, which I
Yes.
think is a fabulous organization to try and change the education of our young people who want to learn about animals without having to sacrifice them in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Do you spend much time at sanctuaries?
I wish I could spend more time, but it's been great, the sanctuaries that I have been to. And I know you've had some great ones on your podcast. I went to Unity Farm Sanctuary in Massachusetts. It was wonderful. I just went
Uh,
to Love and Arms in Colorado
oh,
for
I
a
love that
National
one.
Animal Rights
Yes.
Day. Harvest Home in
Mm,
Stockton is wonderful. So yeah, I love sanctuaries. I love seeing the sanctuary animals. They're always so inspiring, and I love the people that do sanctuary work.
absolutely. So, looking to the future, what would you like to see the legacy of our honor and your personal advocacy work look like for animals? How are we going to help everyday people create a better place for all species?
We think that by changing the culture of the veterinary profession to one that questions existing systems and supports animal-free food production and animal-free experimentation, that can make the biggest impact on the animals. So, and we're already witnessing that in real time. We're witnessing the veterinary profession changing as we go on. I was able to speak at the largest veterinary conference in the country, VMX, last year, and it was a well-attended talk about what we're doing, and so many people were supportive, and we had a booth there. And I hope more students will reach out to us to help change their veterinary school curriculum and really start to question all of the animal agriculture funding influence into their schools. But also, veterinarians, we have the power to change policy in the United States and talk to these senators and Congress people. And I hope more veterinarians will be doing that, not to lend legitimacy to these systems, but to dismantle them and to support the need for animal-free methods of food production. And I predict, we could see the end of animal-based protein production en masse in the next 50 years, because we'll need to, because we are seeing more and more viruses of pandemic potential. Fewer people want to work in these facilities. We're seeing lower crop yields. We're not able to feed these many animals. We're running out of land. We're running out of water. And I think the corporations are going to see that this is the direction the wind is blowing. They can't continue investing in these outdated models. And these dairies and pig facilities, they only last 20 to 30 years before they need to rebuild. And I think communities are no longer going to let them rebuild in their towns. So we are going to see a drastic change. We're going to need to see a drastic change, and veterinarians will be the key part of all of that.
Very well said. So tell us how we can find you, and tell us if there's anything that you'd like to share before we go, and how we can support you.
So you can go to ourhonor.org and subscribe to our newsletter and reach out to us through there. And we're also on all the social media platforms at Our Honor Vets. And you can also follow me personally, Dr. Crystal Heath, on all of the social media platforms. And what's going on next? We will be promoting our new paper that came out in the Journal of Veterinary Medical Education about how many animals are killed in each veterinary school, and working to change that. But I'm also raising awareness about heat stress in dairy cows right now in the Central Valley of California. It's going to be 106 degrees this weekend, and cows experience heat stress at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And what I'm seeing in the footage I'm capturing, these facilities cannot mitigate the heat, and these cows are suffering. And I hope to get more press attention about that too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. This has been Cheryl Moss at Better Life for Animals. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe so that we can create a better life for animals.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.